Nobody ever remembered her name. That was the first thing Dina Howell learned when she arrived at Station Orinthal 3 years ago. The alien delegates walked past her like she was furniture. The cleaning drones paid her more attention than most ambassadors did. She was not important. Earth's diplomatic file said her title was Junior Attaché, which was a fancy way of saying she carried bags, refilled water containers, and took notes that nobody read. The human delegation had 6 people. 6 out of a station that housed thousands of diplomats from 42 species. Their office was a single room on the lowest level, wedged between a storage unit and a recycling shaft that hummed all night. Today was a full council session in the Grand Accord Hall, and Dina sat at her usual spot. Last row, far corner, data pad balanced on her knee. The hall was enormous. Curved walls of pale stone rose up to a ceiling that displayed a live map of the galaxy, stars drifting slowly overhead. Hundreds of delegates filled the tiered seats, arranged by species rank. The Rashani sat at the top, their crystalline bodies catching the light like living chandeliers. The Tessani clicked and hummed from their section, their insectoid wings folded neatly behind them. The Polani floated in sealed water pods, their tentacles pressing buttons on waterproof consoles. Humans sat at the bottom. Tier 7. Provisional members. 11 years in the council, and they still had no voting power. Ambassador Robert Frost stood at the human podium. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes who had spent most of his career trying to make aliens take him seriously. Today, he was attempting to raise a concern about safety protocols on a proposed hyperspace trade corridor. If the council would consider, Frost began, the cargo safety standards for the council recognizes the Rashani delegation. The session moderator interrupted. Ambassador Sawyer of the Rashani rose from his elevated seat. He was tall, even for his kind, and his body was made of layered crystal that shifted color with his mood. Right now, it was a cold, dismissive blue. "Must we endure this again?" Sawyer said. His voice carried effortlessly through the chamber. "The human delegate wishes to discuss safety protocols." How charming. Perhaps next they will teach us how to breathe or how to count past 10 using their soft little fingers. Laughter rippled through the upper tiers. Not all of them, but enough that Frost's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "Ambassador Sawyer, I am simply requesting that. You are requesting time that belongs to civilizations who earned their seats," Sawyer cut in. He stepped forward, and his crystalline form caught the galaxy map's light, scattering tiny stars across the chamber floor. Humans were admitted to this council as a courtesy, a gesture of patience from elder species. Do not mistake patience for respect. More laughter. The Tessani delegate looked uncomfortable. The Polani showed no reaction. Old Hadro of the Lurian Federation, a massive reptilian elder who had been on the council longer than most species had been members, simply watched with half-closed eyes. Frost sat down. There was nothing else he could do. Dina watched all of this from the back row. Her face showed nothing. Her hands were still. But on her datapad, beneath the official meeting notes, she had a second file open. It was a spreadsheet she had been building for 5 months, filled with shipping accident reports, cargo manifests, and insurance records, all pulled from the station's public archive, all freely available, all ignored by every delegation on this station. She added a new entry. Today's date, session 4271. Corridor vote scheduled in 6 days. Rashani pushing for accelerated timeline. The session ended 2 hours later. The corridor vote was on track. The Rashani had the support of at least 20 delegations who wanted access to faster trade routes. Nobody had asked about safety data. Nobody had checked the accident reports. Back in the cramped human office, Frost loosened his collar and dropped into his chair. The rest of the team filtered in quietly. Nobody spoke about what happened in the chamber. They never did. After 11 years, humiliation had become routine. "We may lose observer status at the next review," Frost said to no one in particular. "If we cannot demonstrate value to the Council, Earth gets pushed to Tier 8. Advisory only. We would not even be allowed in the chamber." His aide, a young man named Riku, asked if there was anything they could do. "Smile. Be polite. Stay invisible," Frost said. "That is our strategy. That has always been our strategy." The team left one by one. Dina was the last to go, but she did not go to her quarters. She took the lift down to the station's lower levels, past the residential rings and the commerce decks, all the way to the public data archive. The archive was a vast, quiet hall filled with holographic filing terminals. It stored every public document the Council had ever produced: trade records, survey reports, diplomatic transcripts, shipping logs. Millions of files stretching back centuries. Almost nobody came here in person anymore. Most delegates accessed records remotely, pulling only what they specifically needed. Dina came here 3 times a week. She browsed. She read things that had nothing to do with her job. Accident reports from shipping lanes, insurance filings from trade guilds, survey data from corridor assessments. She did not know exactly what she was looking for when she started. She just had a feeling that something was wrong with the numbers. 5 months later, she was certain. She sat down at her usual terminal, pulled up the corridor data, and kept working. The archive hummed around her. The stars outside the viewing port drifted slowly. And somewhere far above, 42 species governed the galaxy without once looking down to see what the quiet woman at the bottom was building. The archive smelled like old metal and recycled air. Most beings on Station Orinthal would have found it unpleasant. Dina had grown to love it the way a librarian loves the smell of paper. It meant she was somewhere useful, somewhere quiet, somewhere nobody would bother her. She had been coming here for 5 months now, and in that time she had pulled over 4,000 files. Shipping logs, cargo manifests, accident investigation, insurance purchase records, survey data from unmapped corridors. Each file on its own was boring, ordinary, the kind of thing a bureaucrat files and forgets. But together they told a story. 347 shipping incidents in a region of the proposed hyperspace corridor over the past 3 years. The galactic average for a comparable stretch of space would predict fewer than 8. That was not a statistical bump. That was a disaster being hidden in plain sight, scattered across so many filing categories that no single search would ever catch it, unless someone sat down and read every single one. Dina had done exactly that. She tried to bring it to Ambassador Frost first. She waited until the office was quiet, laid out a summary on his desk, and explained what the numbers showed. Frost listened. He rubbed his eyes. Then he said, "Dina, the last thing we need right now is to make noise. We are 6 days from a vote that does not involve us. If we start throwing accusations at the Rashani, we lose what little goodwill we have left." "I am not suggesting accusations," Dina said. "I am suggesting that the corridor is dangerous and the data proves it. And who will listen to us? We are Tier 7. We do not even have a vote." He handed the summary back. "Drop it, please, for the good of the delegation." Dina took the file and left without argument. She did not drop it. That evening, she went back to the archive. The hall was nearly empty, as it usually was at this hour. The terminals glowed softly in long rows, and the only sound was the gentle hum of the station's systems. She was not alone, though. At a terminal near the back, a squat, 6-limbed figure was sorting through geological survey files with the careful attention of someone who genuinely enjoyed their work. Brel, the Gorvathi archivist. Brel was one of the few aliens on the station who treated Dina like a person. The Gorvathi were a minor species themselves, Tier 6, just one step above humans. They were short, round, covered in thick gray skin, and had 6 arms that could operate multiple terminals at once. They were also deeply, passionately devoted to record keeping. To a Gorvathi, a well-organized archive was a thing of beauty. "You are here again," Brel said, all 6 eyes blinking in sequence. "Third time this week." "I like reading," Dina said. "No one likes reading council shipping logs," Brel replied. "But you do, and that makes you the most interesting human I have met. What are you looking for?" Dina hesitated. Then she decided to trust the archivist. She showed Brel the data, the accident clusters, the pattern, the numbers that did not add up. Brel went very still. All 6 arms stopped moving. "This is from public files, every bit of it, and nobody has seen this. Nobody has looked." Brel was quiet for a long time. Then, with a low rumbling sound that Dina had learned was the Gorvathi version of a sigh, the archivist turned to the terminal and began pulling records Dina had not been able to access. Deeper shipping logs from guild-level databases that were still public, but buried under layers of cross-referencing that would take a single person weeks to navigate. With 6 arms, Brel did it in an hour. What they found made the pattern worse. The accidents clustered around a specific region within the corridor, a stretch of space where gravitational readings fluctuated wildly, suggesting an unstable subspace layer. And the Rashani Trade Guild had been purchasing catastrophic loss insurance on routes through that exact region for over 2 years. Long before the corridor was officially proposed to the council, they knew. The Rashani knew the corridor was dangerous, and they had been preparing to profit from it. Brel sat back on all 6 legs and stared at the data. "This is very bad," the archivist said quietly. "If that corridor opens, ships will fly through an unstable region without knowing. Cargo crews, small haulers, species that cannot afford their own survey teams." "I know," Dina said. "What will you do?" That was the question. Dina had no rank, no vote, no standing to present evidence to the council. She was a note-taker from a Tier 7 species. If she walked into the Grand Accord Hall and started making claims about Rashani corruption, she would be removed before she finished her first sentence. And the human delegation would probably be expelled entirely. She sat in the archive for a long time after Brel left, staring at the data on her screen. 347 incidents. Real ships, real crews, beings from dozens of species who had flown through that region and never come home, and no one had asked why, because the data was filed in the wrong categories and nobody ever bothered to browse. Then she had an idea. She did not need to speak to the council. She did not need standing or rank or a vote. She just needed the right delegates to ask the right questions. And she knew exactly which ones would care enough to listen. Dina closed her files, stood up, and left the archive. She had 6 days. That was enough. She had been invisible for 3 years. Now she was going to use it. 5 days before the vote, Dina walked into the Tessani Embassy lounge carrying nothing but a thin data tablet and a cup of cold water she had forgotten to drink an hour ago. The Tessani were insectoid, tall, angular beings with 4 arms, compound eyes, and wings they kept folded flat against their backs indoors. Their entire civilization was built on trade. Every Tessani colony, every hive city, every family unit depended on cargo ships moving safely between stars. If the new corridor was dangerous, the Tessani would lose more ships and more lives than almost anyone else. Delegate Mira was reviewing documents at a long, curved desk when Dina entered. She looked up with all 5 eyes, and her antennae twitched in mild surprise. "You are the human note-taker," Mira said. It was not a question. "I am," Dina said. "I have something I think you should see. Not as an accusation, just as a concern." She placed the data tablet on the desk and stepped back. On the screen was a simple chart. Accident frequency in the proposed corridor region, plotted against the galactic average. The difference was so large it barely fit on the same scale. Mira stared at it for a long time. Her wings unfolded slightly, which Dina had learned was a sign of agitation. "Where did you get this?" "Public archive. Every number is verifiable. And your ambassador sent you." "No, he does not know I am here." Mira's antennae went flat. "Then why are you here?" Dina thought about the answer carefully. "Because if that corridor opens, your cargo crews will fly through it. And they deserve to know what is waiting for them." She left without another word. She did not argue. She did not push. She let the data sit. 4 days before the vote, Dina visited the Polani delegation. The Polani were aquatic beings who lived in pressurized water environments on the station. Their embassy was a sealed dome of warm salt water, and visitors spoke to them through a translation membrane at the entrance. Dina pressed her hand to the membrane and requested a moment of the delegation's time. A Polani analyst named Dreeth floated close to the barrier, tentacles curling with curiosity. "A human at our door," Dreeth gurgled through the translator. "That is unusual. I have a data set I would like your delegation to review," Dina said. She transmitted the compiled shipping accident data, the insurance records, and the gravitational survey readings. "I believe there is a pattern, but I want someone more qualified than me to verify it. You want us to check your work? I want you to check the numbers. If I am wrong, I am wrong. But if I am right, the council should know before the vote." Dretha's tentacles spread wide. The Polanyi gesture for deep interest. We will look at this. That was all Dina needed. The Polanyi were obsessed with data. They would not just check her numbers. They would rebuild the entire analysis from scratch, verify every source, and produce a conclusion so thorough it could not be dismissed. 3 days before the vote, Dina made her most important visit. Old Hadro of the Lurian Federation had served on the council for 60 years. He was a massive reptilian being, slow-moving, with scaled skin the color of dark iron and eyes that had seen more political games than most species had played. He was known for two things: patience and a deep hatred of corruption. Delegates feared him not because he was loud, but because when he spoke, he was always right. Dina found him in the garden terrace on the station's upper ring, sitting on a bench that groaned under his weight, watching the stars through the transparent ceiling. "Delegate Hadro," she said, "may I ask you a question?" He turned one huge eye toward her. "You are from the human delegation." "Yes." "You're the one who sits in the back and writes things down." "Yes." He made a low rumbling sound. "Ask your question." Dina sat on the bench beside him. She did not show him any data. She did not present a case. She simply asked, "Has anyone ever looked at the insurance purchase records for the proposed corridor?" Hadro did not answer immediately. He sat very still, which for a Lurian meant he was thinking deeply. Then he turned both eyes toward her and said, "No, I do not believe anyone has." "Perhaps someone should," Dina said. She stood, thanked him for his time, and walked away. Meanwhile, Ambassador Sawyer was working the upper tiers. The Rashani delegate moved through embassy lounges and private meetings with the ease of someone who had been in power so long he had forgotten what it felt like to be questioned. He secured pledges from 3 more delegations. He pushed for the vote to be moved up by a day. He made jokes about the human delegation at a formal dinner, suggesting they be relocated to an observation deck so they could watch real diplomacy without getting in the way. Dina heard about the jokes from Brel the archivist, who heard everything that happened on the station. "Does it bother you?" Brel asked. "Not anymore," Dina said on the last night before the preliminary vote. As Dina was preparing to sleep in her small quarters, her data pad chimed. An encrypted message. She opened IT. IT was from the Polanyi delegation. One line. "Your numbers are correct. All of them." Dina read it twice. Then she set the pad down, lay on her bed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow the council would vote. Tomorrow, if everything went as planned, the right questions would be asked by the right people, and nobody would ever know it started with the woman they forgot to notice. The Grand Accord Hall was full. Every seat taken, every delegation present. 42 species gathered under the slow-turning galaxy map on the ceiling. The air buzzed with 100 different languages being filtered through translation systems. Pages shuffled. Consoles beeped. Water pods hummed. Dina sat in her usual place. Last row, far corner, data pad on her knee. She had not slept well. Her eyes were tired and her hands were steady. She looked like what she always looked like. Nobody. Ambassador Sawyer opened the session. He stood at the central podium, his crystalline body glowing a confident gold, and delivered a presentation that was, Dina had to admit, impressive. Holographic trade projections filled the chamber. Growth estimates, connectivity maps, economic models showing how the new hyperspace corridor would reduce shipping times by 40% across 12 sectors. It was polished, persuasive, and built on numbers that were technically true, as long as you did not look at what was missing. This corridor, Sawyer declared, represents the single greatest economic opportunity this council has seen in a generation. I urge all delegations to support the preliminary vote and move toward full approval. Applause came from the upper tiers. The Rashani allies clapped or clicked or vibrated in their species-appropriate ways. Frost shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Riku, beside him, whispered something about staying quiet. Dina watched the Tessani section. Delegate Mira sat perfectly still, her wings pressed flat. The moderator called for questions. 2 delegations asked minor procedural things. A third requested a timeline adjustment. Everything was moving exactly as the Rashani wanted. Then Mira raised one of her 4 arms. The council recognizes Delegate Mira of the Tessani, the moderator said. Mira stood. Her voice was calm, almost casual, the way someone asks a question they already know the answer to. I have a simple inquiry for the record. According to publicly available shipping data, there have been 347 incidents in the proposed corridor region over the past 3 years. The predicted average for a comparable region would be fewer than 8. Can the proposing delegation explain this difference? The chamber went quiet. Not the silence of boredom, the silence of surprise. Sawyer's crystalline form flickered. A brief shift from gold to pale blue. I am not familiar with those figures, he said smoothly. I suspect the delegate is referencing outdated or incomplete data. The data is current and complete, Mira said. I have verified it personally. Before Sawyer could respond, a second hand rose. Old Hadro of the Lurian Federation, moving slowly, the way a mountain moves when it decides to speak. The council recognizes Delegate Hadro. Hadro did not stand. He was too large for that to be necessary. He simply turned his massive head towards Sawyer and spoke in a voice like grinding stone. Can the Rashani Trade Guild explain why it purchased catastrophic loss insurance on 90% of the routes within the proposed corridor, 2 years before the corridor was officially proposed to this council? This time the silence was absolute. Sawyer's body went from blue to white. That is, those are private trade guild records that have no bearing on their public filings, Hadro said. I checked. Then the Polani delegate, Dreeth, activated the chamber's central holographic display. Numbers filled the air above the podium. Accident locations, gravitational anomaly readings, insurance purchase dates, and shipping loss reports. Every data point Dina had compiled, rebuilt from scratch by the most data-obsessed species in the galaxy, verified and formatted so clearly that even the delegates who hated reading could understand it at a glance. Our analysis confirms the pattern, Dreeth announced. The corridor passes through an unstable subspace layer. The Rashani survey teams mapped this instability 4 years ago. The data was filed, but never shared with the full council. The chamber erupted. Delegates from a dozen species began shouting. The Tessani delegation demanded an immediate safety review. 2 smaller species whose ships had been lost in that region rose to demand answers. The Rashani allies began pulling back, sensing the political ground shifting beneath them. Sawyer tried to regain control. This is an ambush, he said, his voice rising. This is coordinated interference from. He stopped. His crystal eyes swept the chamber, searching for the source. Who initiated this? Who compiled this data? Nobody answered. Mira said nothing. Hadro said nothing. Dreeth said nothing. Nobody looked at the back row. Dina sat with her data pad on her knee, her face blank, her breathing even. She watched Sawyer search the chamber for an enemy he could not find because the enemy was someone he had never bothered to see. Ambassador Frost turned in his seat. He looked at Dina. His expression shifted from confusion to understanding in 3 seconds. She met his eyes and gave him the smallest nod. Barely a movement, barely anything at all. The moderator called for order. It took several minutes. When the noise finally settled, the preliminary vote was suspended. A formal investigation into the corridor data was launched. The Rashani delegation was placed under review as the session ended and delegates filed out in heated clusters. Dina gathered her things quietly. Brel was waiting near the exit, all 6 eyes wide. You did this, Brel whispered. I read some files, Dina said. You save lives. Dina paused. She thought about the cargo crews who would have flown through that corridor without knowing. The small haulers. The independent pilots from species too minor to have their own survey teams. Not yet, she said. But maybe. She walked out of the Grand Accord Hall the same way she had walked in, through the back door, unnoticed, carrying her data pad under her arm. 2 weeks after the session, Dina still could not walk through the station's lower corridors without someone stopping her. Not loudly, not publicly, but quietly, in a way that mattered more. A Tessani cargo officer found her in the cafeteria and placed a small carved token on her table without a word, a Tessani mark of personal debt. A Gorvathi engineer stopped her in a hallway and said, Simply, my brother flew that corridor last year. His ship was damaged. He survived. I wanted to thank whoever found the data. Then he walked away before she could respond. The formal investigation had moved fast. The Council's review board pulled the Ratione survey data and confirmed everything. The unstable subspace layer, the hidden gravitational anomalies, the pattern of catastrophic failures that had been killing ships for years. Ambassador Sawyer was recalled by his own government within a week. Not as punishment, the Ratione said publicly. A routine reassignment. Nobody believed them. The corridor vote was indefinitely postponed. 3 new safety protocols were proposed for future trade route assessments, including mandatory independent surveys, something that had never been required before. And somewhere in the background of all this, people had started to notice humans. Delegate Mira invited Dina to a private dinner at the Tessani embassy. This was significant. The Tessani did not eat with outsiders casually. Meals were communal events tied to trust and alliance. Being invited meant being recognized as someone worth knowing. The food was strange, small, nutrient-dense pellets that the Tessani consumed by dissolving them on their mandibles. But Mira had arranged for a plate of simple grain and vegetables for Dina. A small kindness that meant someone had researched what humans ate. I must be honest with you, Mira said, halfway through the meal. When you first brought me that data, I almost ignored it. I know, Dina said, not because the numbers were bad, because they came from a human. Mira's antennae dipped, a gesture of shame. I'm not proud of that. You still listened. That is what matters. Why did you do it? Mira asked. You had no obligation. Your species had nothing to gain. If the corridor opened, humans would barely have been affected. You do not have enough ships to use it. Dina set down her fork. I kept thinking about the crews. Not from any one species. Just the crews. The ones who wake up, check their cargo, fly their routes, and trust that someone somewhere made sure the path was safe. Nobody was doing that for them. And I could. Mira was quiet for a long time. Then she said, that is a very human answer. 3 days later, old Hadro visited the human delegation's office. He had to duck through the doorway, and once inside, he filled most of the room. He looked at the cramped space, the outdated terminals, the single window that faced a maintenance shaft. 11 years, he said. We gave you this. Ambassador Frost stood up quickly. Delegate Hadro, this is an unexpected. Sit down, Robert. Hadro had never used Frost's first name before. I'm not here for diplomacy. I am here because your people did something none of us bothered to do, and you did it from a closet with broken equipment. He looked around once more. That is going to change. He left without further explanation. Within a week, the human delegation received notice that they were being relocated to a proper office suite on the mid-level diplomatic ring. 3 rooms, updated equipment, a window that looked out at the stars. The Polani published a formal analysis of the corridor data methodology. Their report praised the original compilation for its cross-referential pattern recognition and systematic approach rarely observed in council proceedings. They did not name Dina. Academic tradition, they said. But within the station's diplomatic circles, everyone knew. Dina was offered a promotion, senior data analyst for Earth's diplomatic corps, based at headquarters. Better pay, better title, a real career path. It would mean leaving the station. She thought about it for 2 days. She called her mother through the long-distance relay, a connection that took 40 minutes to establish and cost more than she wanted to think about. The signal was grainy, the audio delayed, but her mother's voice was clear. Are you eating enough? Her mother asked first. Always first. Yes, Mom. And are you happy? Dina thought about that. Happy was a complicated word. She was tired. She was still largely invisible. She was a note-taker who had accidentally changed the direction of galactic trade policy. She lived in a small room on a space station 1,000 light-years from the town in New Zealand where she grew up. I think I am where I need to be, she said. Then stay, her mother said. You were always the one who noticed things. Do not stop now. Dina turned down the promotion. That night, as she was organizing her files in the new office, her data pad chimed. An anonymous message. No sender tag, no species identifier. Just a data packet and a single line of text. The packet contained shipping records from a completely different sector, the Verity Expanse, 3,000 light-years from the proposed corridor. Different routes, different species involved, but the same pattern. Accident crusteur, insurance anomalies, survey data that did not match public reports. The message read, "There are more corridors. Will you look?" Dina stared at the screen for a long time. Then she opened a new file, labeled it with today's date, and started reading. 6 months changed everything and nothing at the same time. The station still hummed. The galaxy map still turned on the ceiling of the Grand Accord Hall. Delegates still argued, voted, and made deals in embassy lounges over drinks that humans could not pronounce. The universe carried on the way it always had. But if you looked carefully, and Dina always looked carefully, things were different. Earth delegation was now Tier 5, 2 full ranks higher than where they had been for over a decade. The promotion came after a council review that noted, in dry bureaucratic language, that humanity had demonstrated consistent analytical contribution to council integrity. It was the most boring compliment in galactic history, and Frost had framed it on the wall. The cramped single room was gone. The human delegation now occupied a proper office suite on the mid-level ring. 3 rooms, decent terminals, and a window that showed the stars instead of a maintenance shaft. 4 new analysts had been brought in from Earth, young and sharp and hungry to prove that what Dina had done was not a one-time accident. And Dina had a title that had not existed 6 months ago, Human Liaison for Data Integrity. She hated the title. It sounded like a made-up position for someone they did not know how to categorize. But the work was real, and it mattered. And that was enough in 6 months, her small team had quietly identified irregularities in 3 more trade agreements. They had flagged a chemical dumping operation in the Tassini shipping lanes that would have poisoned 2 colony worlds. They had helped the Polani verify a disputed tariff calculation that saved dozens of smaller species from being overcharged for decades. And they had caught an error in a Lurian Federation survey that, left uncorrected, would have sent mining ships into an asteroid field mapped as empty space. None of it made headlines. None of it was dramatic. It was just work, careful, patient, invisible work done by people who read every page and checked every number. Today was the Council's annual review, and for the first time in the history of Earth's membership, the human delegation had been invited to present. Ambassador Frost could have done it himself. He had earned that right. He had spent 11 years being humiliated in this chamber, smiling through insults, holding his team together when the Council treated them like furniture. But when the time came, he looked at Dina and said, "This is yours." She almost refused. She was not a speaker. She was not a politician. She was the woman who sat in the back row and wrote things down. "Exactly," Frost said. "That is why it should be you." So Dina stood at the central podium of the Grand Accord Hall, in front of 42 species, under the slow-turning galaxy map, and she presented her team's report. She did not give a speech. She did not make grand claims about humanity's place in the galaxy. She presented data, clear, clean, verified, and organized so well that even delegates who despised reading could follow every point. She explained what her team had found, what it meant, and what the Council could do about it. She spoke for 12 minutes. She did not raise her voice once. When she finished, Old Hadro was the first to stand. His massive form rose slowly, and the chamber noticed. Then Mira stood, her wings spreading slightly in the Tassini gesture of respect. Then the Polani delegate, Dreeth, pressed against the wall of the water pod in their version of a salute. One by one, other delegates rose. Not all of them. Not the ones who still thought humans were beneath their notice. But enough that it was not a standing ovation. The Council did not do ovations. It was a gesture of recognition, an acknowledgement that someone had earned the right to stand where she was standing. The Rashani delegation's new representative, a younger crystalline being named CRYSDH, did not stand. But she gave a small nod, a tiny thing, a beginning. After the session, the hall emptied slowly. Delegates clustered in groups, talking about the report, about the data, about what the humans had built in 6 quiet months. Frost accepted congratulations with the grace of a man who had waited a very long time for this moment. Dina slipped out through the back door. She walked through the station's corridors to the new office. It was late, and the hallways were mostly empty. Her footsteps echoed on the metal floor. Through the windows, stars drifted past, distant, ancient, indifferent to the small dramas of the beings who sailed between them. Brel was waiting in the office. The Gorvathi archivist had a stack of new data files on the desk and a warm drink that smelled like burnt cinnamon, the closest thing to tea that the station's food systems could produce. Good presentation, Brel said. It was just numbers, Dina said. It was never just numbers. Burrell pushed the stack of files toward her. New batch. 3 sectors. I flagged the ones that looked strange. Dina sat down. She took a sip of the almost tea. She opened her data pad, pulled up the first file, and started reading. Outside the window, the galaxy turned slowly. 42 species governed the stars with warships, wealth, and the volume of their voices. They measured power in territory and treaties and the ability to make others listen. They had never considered that the most dangerous thing in the universe might be a quiet woman with a datapad and the patience to read every single page. But they were learning.